Hey guys, welcome to Listen Bitch Presents Tell Me Why You're Special. This this is the arena where we don't just talk about personality, we talk about the patterns underneath it. We talk about what's underlying because the truth is, like most people think they know themselves, probably myself included, but what they really know is their reactions. They know their defenses, they know their emotional habits and their survival patterns. And eventually, you start realizing how many people are just living on autopilot, repeating the same cycles, choosing the same chaos, dating the same people everywhere you go, there you are, sabotaging the same opportunities, and calling it, they say, this is just who I am. God did not create you to stay trapped in unconscious patterns forever. Self awareness matters because once you could truly see yourself, you become responsible for what you do next. So today we're going to talk about personality, stoicism, emotional control, identity, self mastery. Let's talk about why humans keep repeating the same weird shit over and over and over again. Today's guest is Arky Jones. He is the founder of PersonalityPeek and someone deeply fascinated by why people think, react, struggle, spiral, grow, and become who they become. So let's get into this today. Arky, thank you so much for coming into the hot seat. Let's talk about what makes you special. Can I talk today? I know words. What is a pattern that you recognized in yourself that really completely changed the way you understood your life and how you see yourself?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me on. And then let's get straight into the question. What I would say from a pattern recognition perspective is that throughout life, I kind of realized that there was stages or seasons, and it became more obvious to me once my children were born. My first one was born when I was 21 years old. And what I've noticed is that I'd been certainly, let's say, for example, that you wanted to have a good time and you would go out and get yourself absolutely hammered. And you thought that was a good time with your friends, or you'd see your friends, making decisions that led to short-term dopamine fixes over long-term kind of joy. So that was the introduction into the self-exploration because there was one question I wanted to know. I hold a baby in my arms. They're in university now, nearly finished, but and there was a sunlight coming through the window, and I was at the top of the stairs, and I just looked at this baby, my baby, and was like, what more could God, the universe, give me in this moment? And basically switched my entire thinking in that moment from what can I get out of this? Like, what can I get for short term kind of joy to how can I make sure that this precious thing in front of me has the best opportunity in life? And that for me was it was like a switch in the brain. And then earlier than that, when you're a little bit younger, you were like, "Oh, I'm free from my parents, left home at 16." And then, and then as you grow, but the problem was again the pattern thing that you said earlier. I did notice that every now and again those old patterns would try and creep in, and you had to work very hard to get on top of it. I think, old days we would have even made a joke that we've got demons, but I think there is some truth in that. And there's a song that says this, and I heard this maybe about 8 years ago, and that's about the time I started working on the project at Personality Peak, and it said, don't basically you'll never be able to let your demons go, but just keep them on a tight leash. And I think that understanding ourselves is is been a journey for me that has been because I got so much benefit from it. I then decided to share that. And just to give you a tiny bit of insight, is I actually wrote Applied Stoicism and Don't Give Two Shits before I started the Personality Peak project. And those books led me to like, okay, but what brought me to this point? So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love that. And I love, first of all, I think stoicism kind of got me through a tough season. I don't think it's something really that it's just not my personality. Like I loved it. It saved my ass, right? Like it saved me
Mhm.
through a season, but I think it does take a lot of practice, but also like we're meant to be here for the human experience and we're meant to, look at these babies and think, yeah, like how can I be better? And then even looking at them as adults, I mean, there's a whole different spectrum of how we can step into who we really are and taking that responsibility. What is something that you see people blaming on personality that's actually like just conditioned?
So look, the truth is, it is when we say something, and I'm sorry to answer a very narrow question with a broad answer, but it will come to a
Yeah.
point. So the problem is, we are told we need things. We are told to consume. We're almost brought up in a way that we're set up that external validation is more important than your internal journey, your internal peace and comfort. Other philosophies around the world, they orientate differently now, but that's not how we're living. So with what we've got, with what's happened in the West, where it's incredibly successful. So let's first of all celebrate penicillin, air travel, mobile phones, absolutely brilliant inventions. However, one thing where it's gone wrong is that, for example, people will identify as, I've got the new phone, I've got the latest Range Rover, I've got the best computer. And this is something that I've been quite lucky that I was able to sit outside, because I think probably the biggest thing for me was when I was 18. I was in the military, and I got my first paycheck. And of course, as soon as you get your first paycheck, you can get loans, and they throw loans at you like crazy loans. So I went out and bought a Mercedes. And at 18, I thought I was the bee's knees. But you know what I couldn't afford? Insurance.
Yeah.
And you know what I did with five guys in the car? Put it into a wall,
Correct.
because I was just showing off. And it was gone. And in that moment, that thing that I thought I really wanted was gone.
Yeah.
And I realized that it was just a car. And now I was saddled with, and luckily it was secondhand, but at the time it was a lot of money to me. I was saddled with this debt, and I thought I'd wanted something, and I did. That's exactly what I did. I wanted it. I didn't need it, and therefore, to answer the question, is one big thing is thinking you need something that you want and not appreciating what you actually need. But when you can break it down back to base of what you actually need, it actually, the whole life becomes a lot simpler.
Yeah. I think I see that pattern in like number one, the systems. I call it the systems. I'm doing a whole rebellion season on the flagship of this show. It's everything's orchestrated for you to be the consumer. Like they dangle the shiny things, and it's in everything. It's in media, social media, the news, the TV, the movies, everything. And I actually, for a very long time, I've had that awareness of like, I almost really feel sorry for people that you see them like they just got another car. They've got like seven cars, all the same color. Like I feel a literal heartbreak because I see what's really happening. And to me, that is someone trying to just fill this void of like emptiness and the next thing, right? That's going to make us feel better. And I think we've gotten so derailed with that. Like we want to feel something. We're humans. We want to feel something. We just got off track, and we think that that Amazon order that's coming tomorrow, that's going to make me feel so good. It was the same thing, right? Like I published my books, and I thought I was going to feel something because it was a dream come true. Thought like big fireworks, a big event was going to happen. Nothing happened. The book was
Right.
published. Everybody woke up, did the same stuff. Like I, everywhere we go, there we are truly. Um, and so I do think that it's been orchestrated. So to a point, I feel like it's been put on us, but also I think everybody gets a chance in life to have that awareness and take responsibility. You know,
Yes. I think that, look, what I will say is that you have agency. And so let me just get a little bit more. This is going to be a little bit more philosophical, but it will come to the point because it puts it into perspective. And this is a tiny bit stoic, but it's also just something that I've thought heavily on.
yeah,
So what existed before the Big Bang is infinite potential, okay? And some would call that God, infinite potential, okay? Infinite creation. It is beyond what we can understand. That same energy that created that is what created us. So we're a knock-on effect. So the chance of us existing is astronomically low. we almost have no chance of being here. So just by being alive, being able to walk with bare feet on clean grass, being able to look up at the stars in admiration, being able to feel the warmth of the sun on the skin, we're already winning. And so long as you have agency, so long as you're not, trapped in a cage, I like to, hope is probably the word for it. People say, I want to be happy. I don't think you do. Because happiness, you can achieve that in many ways. You can achieve it chemically, you can achieve it, but probably for me, what I want to be is I want to be always working to something that makes me feel I have value. And that value has to come from me because there's two things in life that if you can learn this, you will be set up for an easier life. One is you cannot control other people, no matter how much you want, and you can't own their soul, you can't own the inside. Two, you can only have true agency over yourself. If you externalize agency and you go from outside onwards and they put upon you, I would argue that's not you. And let me give you one very quick example of this. So when you're driving in traffic and somebody cuts you up at the last minute, yes, their driving is unprofessional and uncourteous and could be better. But the moment you raise your voice, the moment you raise a finger, the moment you show anger, you have given ownership of yourself to them because their actions influenced you. Whereas if you just drop back, observe, and tell yourself something like it doesn't matter what's true because you only have agency of you. You tell yourself this that they're in a rush to see their dying mother. And that sounds extreme, but as soon as you do that, the brain signal files that in. Oh, I'm actually in a doing, I'm a helping mode. So the negative consequence becomes a bad action because what I will tell you, and I can only speak for myself, but I'm pretty sure this is a common thing, is once you do have an adrenaline dump, you then feel bad afterwards. So you might go home, you might, shout at the dog or the cat won't listen to you, but the dog does. But shout at the dog or tell the wife like, "Oh, this bloody person." But whereas if you just drop back, don't engage, keep agency on the self, that you have none of those feelings and it doesn't affect you.
Yeah. I love that advice, and I think it's like you're speaking right to me, Arky. Because yeah, I feel like I've learned a lot of I'm not reactive anymore. I'm just not. People are like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not reactive unless you put me in a car, and someone does something stupid." And I am definitely like I rage out. So that's good advice. I'm gonna think about their mom next time. I'm just gonna say their mom is sick, their kid is sick, something is happening in this experience. I love that advice. This is something that I think a lot of my listeners could actually relate to, that I think that you would have some great advice about, or even just an answer to. Why do we constantly repeat patterns that we know are hurting us?
So the problem with so we in our brains we have a thing called neuroplasticity. So what neuroplasticity does throughout our lifetime, we are able to create new neurons, forge new pathways, and become new. Or so just to start this with hope that even though we do repeat patterns, that there is hope. Now, also what I will say is again, and I'm not trying to be overly joyous, but if you realize that there is a pattern, so let's say for example you keep dating the wrong type of partner, boy or girl, doesn't irrelevant. You keep dating the wrong type of partner, and say for example you're looking for a longer term relationship, but the characteristics of the short term traits is for whatever reason it is what draws you in. Now, what is occurring actually is a couple of phases. So phase one is I know this pattern and I know this works in the past. So this has led to short-term dopamine releases in the brain. So what the brain has associated with that is exactly the same, but on a deeper level as the Amazon parcel coming the next day. I will open it. I will feel anticipation. I will get the reward. I will get the letdown. And you can train yourself to track to chase, my apologies, dopamine hits. Now, the problem is with the feed. For example, one of the books I'm working on at the minute is basically a non-biographical experience of the late 80s, 90s, as a child coming into adulthood called Before the Feed. Now, younger people these days, the feed is exactly designed the same way as drugs that stimulate dopamine response and slot machines. I think in America you call them gambling machines. You know
Yeah, the slot machines. Yep.
slot machines. Yeah, yeah, awesome. And they use the same science for that
Yes.
feed to do that. So what's that doing is it's constantly triggering this dopamine response. So that is your awareness, guys. It's not the complete picture because we can bring in serotonin, but for now, you will get something that gives you a short-term reward. That pattern, it doesn't have no value. If it had a zero-sum value, you wouldn't do it because you don't touch a hot kettle every day. You don't, drink cold tea. You might if you drink iced tea, but you get the point. There's some things you just don't do because you've realized that doesn't give you a dopaminergic response. But dating, even risky dating, it can cause that. You've got the chase, you've got the dates, you've got the unknowns, and you've got this build-up. But let's say, for example, that you then want something else. The pattern that you're in has to be a conscious choice because one side with the short-term stuff, what you get is you get thrill, you get novel, you get excitement. What you get with the long-term commitment is, and me and my wife, I've been married since I'm 44 now. I've been married since I was 21. Shotgun wedding because
Wow.
the kid was
Yeah.
born.
Hmm.
And the reason I say this is me and my wife openly say this. Love is absolutely real, but what is more important is honesty, loyalty, commitment, and mutual understanding over time. Because the truth is, and I don't mean to break anyone's heart, that I
Yeah.
don't believe soulmates truly exist. What I believe is that two people can be compatible over time and add value to each other's lives. So, what I would say to you to break the pattern is what values am I bringing to this? And what value has the other person got? And where can we compromise?
Yeah. No, I love that, and I very much think it's a choice. Like you guys have to choose each other every day, and it's a conscious choice of waking up and saying, "I'm committed to this." I think you're very spot on with that. And you brought up the neuroplasticity because our brains, I do think, obviously we are stuck in the patterns, and yeah, let's celebrate being aware of the pattern. So let's talk to the person right now that's just running a default mode network and they don't see the pattern. Like, how do those people wake the hell up?
Yeah, I mean that's so obviously I took the easier way out with that first answer
Yeah.
because celebrating that people that already know. So the problem is that if you are genuinely unaware, if you are genuinely no insight into your behavior, unfortunately, the default positioning, the programming isn't going to change at that time. It doesn't mean it won't change, but if you are absolutely so, this is where I would say though is a difficult one because if what you're doing you don't realize it's destructive, outside does, but if it brings you joy and you believe that's the best way, then possibly, even if it's, as long as it's not harming other people, if that is where you are in your life journey, who am I to say it's wrong? Who it is on you. Now, that being said, that where I will argue the point a little bit is that if everything's all hunky dory, it couldn't be better. You're already at the pinnacle. You're at the apex. Then yeah, this is yeah, good on you. But
Yeah.
if there's that niggle in the back of the mind that look, I keep doing this and I keep getting the same results, and actually deep down I'm not happy. That should be a result. I'm not satisfied. I'm not getting what I want from this. Even if 96% you're like, no, 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 this is what I deserve. But that 4% is like, could it be better? And for me, constant inquiry on what can I do better helps me because to be honest, all of us go through days or weeks, even months of doubt and and the truth is like we used to have a very simple answer. We used to have a very, very simple answer is God was integrated into us very, very clearly, and there was no that was your external source. Now we've externalized validation, whereas internalized it when the truth is deep introspection and talk like when so let's just very quickly, and this is not going to be some kind of lecture. Prayer, okay? It doesn't even if you don't believe it, just a quiet word to yourself about the way your day's gone. Have gratitude for what you've done that day. And through gratitude, you sometimes can see chinks in the armor that you're like, oh, hang on a minute. Okay. And then that gives you that little grain just to latch onto and then work towards that. The other thing is just know this, and this I swear this is not some kind of you can fail and be fine because
Right.
failure hurts. And
It does.
not all failure is great, but failure in stuff that gives you opportunity to grow is never wrong. And I have a 1% thing is my day 1% better than yesterday? And it's not always, but if I get more 1% than deductions, overall my life is slowly getting better.
Yeah. I love that. And I think that's where people start to overthink, right? Like we try to do everything all at once and we try to go from 0 to 100. And really, it's just like if you do the next small right thing, you're literally moving the needle every single day. I love that. And the gratitude part you're talking about, Arky, I think that is, I mean, it isn't some woo toxic positivity bullshit. I mean, your brain, scientific, they prove it. A brain on gratitude versus a brain that doesn't have gratitude, it lights up differently. It is very different. It does different things. And I think that's kind of the trigger for the neuroplasticity. That's how we're gonna reconnect things is finding that gratitude. And honestly, that's my foundation. I couldn't if I couldn't wake up and give God everything I can't handle, I would have been crushed from the weight of life, just life. Because we're in the arena, man. And failure is a part of the gig. And for whatever you call it, I think the cost of not trying is way more expensive than the cost of getting beat up all the time. Right? Like I'm in the arena, I'm getting beat up, but what's the other cost? And I think regret ultimately at the end of our lives is the highest price we could ever pay because you don't get a second chance. Um, what's a personality trait that you've seen, Arky, that gets romanticized but is actually creating chaos?
Oh, that's this is a real good one because there's so many. So let me shoot from the hip here.
Yeah.
So I think that the one that probably let me actually make this about what gets me the most. So the probably the hardest one for me is the ultra competent person that is so competent that they can't let anyone else take any like they can't let anyone else have any control within a team or as part of a group. And so even though what they do adds a lot of value, it often really stifles innovation because they already know how to do it perfectly, even though that doesn't exist. So for me, that's one of those traits that can be a superpower, but can also be super, super toxic. And for self-evident reasons that the team is an so once humans work together, we do have I firmly believe we have a shared collective consciousness, but that collective consciousness can be suppressed by very, very domineering personalities, especially hyper competent ones that aren't willing to introspect and ask, can you do better? Because one thing I've always, or a philosophy I have, when I say always, that I actively strive towards is that if I'm doing something, I always ask myself either, what would my wife do right now? Or I pick a character who I admire in my life and be like, what would they do now? And the reason I use my wife is she always says no. And so in a good way, she's like,
I
she's
love
very
it.
bossy, but in a cool way. And or a character who I admire, what would they do now? And that helps me reset it. But yeah, that on that toxic trait, someone who dominates through hyper competence that is not necessarily invalid, but it stifles growth and it stifles group dynamics.
Yeah. And it's not something you can teach other people either. There's no I mean, that's a part of the whole human experience, is that we're kind of created to need each other on some level.
Mm.
Like, you're going to be so great at something that I will never be able to do, and that's how we end up being able to come together. So being willing to admit, like, hey, I'm not good at this, or this isn't my avenue, or whatever. I think it's beautiful in a person for them to be able to admit that. But I even struggle with that sometimes with conversations on the show. I want the real truth. I don't want like your pretty polished perfect life. I want to know what knocked you down and how you got back up, because that's the most relatable thing in the human experience. And I have people come on here. I'll say I've had 110 conversations. I've had two people come on the show that really fought me on saying anything real. They were just like, no, this is so great. And I mean, again, it's like looking at the person who's trying to buy all the things to fill a void, right? I kind of look at them like it's sad, because there is no growth if you can't even relate to people. Like, how is my audience going to relate if they think it just worked out overnight? Your business got successful, you found all these clients, and they try it, it doesn't work out. Like, you crush them. We want to give people the best chance, and that means being honest. Um, and why do you think so many people confuse um, emotional reactions with truth? And I know we're coming up on our time, but I have questions. And what like why do you think so many people, what's the difference between someone who is just completely emotional reactive versus, someone like me? People make fun of me. They're like, the whole house would be on fire, and you just be like, all right, well, let's do the next right thing. You know, what's the difference of people like that?
Well, look, it's let's without I don't like to generalize, but there is truths. There's definite truths and traits. So the idea is of if these like let me just come back to that word agency first,
Yeah.
and I'm not gonna elaborate on it. I'm just gonna say that word. Now the the idea is that the person who let's just go with your version. The house is on fire. What to do next? So there's a core practicality about that that is admirable, but we've still got to get the fire out in the house. Do you know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
so, but to do that, there is certain stages. So get the kids out, get the husband out. Fire alarm, get the animals, and then alert the neighbors. Make sure safety first. There's a practicality in that, but the the spectrum of humanity is what makes it great. But on the extremes is where it becomes something that it makes it difficult to then work with as a group. So the type of person who is always right. Let's just say that type of person. Sorry, Brendan, is this fit in your answer? Because I
Yeah.
don't want to
No.
go off track.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
Nope.
yeah.
You're
Okay,
good.
cool,
You're good.
cool. So the person that is always right. Okay. Now, the reason that that is such an interesting person is that nobody is always right, because the truth is that truth is malleable in almost every situation. So when people say things like this is the way, it's like, okay, the way it needs to be done is this is the way because the evidence up until this point has shown that this is the best way, but it doesn't mean what always is always will be.
Wow.
And so I think that if we remember this, that every and this is not a negative, guys, this is an absolute positive,
Yeah.
because this is all we have. So we are we are born as a miracle, and then we die, and life happens in between that. And what life is a series of moments. That's all it is a series of moments, and all you ever have is any given moment. Now, some people they forget. Now, any given moment doesn't mean we don't work for a better tomorrow, because it would be stupid if we like a great example that I heard is the guy that says, I want to retire and sit on a beach and sip mojitos, yeah? I
Yeah.
guarantee you, after 2 days
He's done.
past 40, you'd end up with a terrible hangover and just want to go home and do something productive. It's actually hell. What is as close to heaven as we can get on earth is growth through us, through what we can control. And so people who do that, who do impose upon you, you have to look at the situation, and very quickly I'll just say this. So you are a different person with your mother than with your father, than with your sisters, than with your brothers, than with your friends, than with your workmates, than with yourself. When you are alone in the dead of the night and you're looking at the ceiling as the fan makes a squeak, that is the time you have to ask yourself, okay, what can I do tomorrow that is going to make my day slightly better? And it's in those moments where you can decide. But also, if you realize you are too dominant, if you realize you're not letting your partner have a say, if you realize that your kids are too controlled or not controlled enough, then you can start doing things about it. And I will just give this tip for the people. Remember, guys, that every single people see you and they themselves store in their brain memories of you. And so family members might see you as this guy, but you're now this guy. But what if you can accept this, that you are you and you have agency over you? You cannot control how they see you, but you can control how you respond to things that work well and not. And so through a kind of, and this is not some hippie stuff, but through responding positively when things are good and responding neutrally to leaning towards, when I say negative, I don't mean badly, I mean negative correctively. When things aren't good, that's one small way that you can negate what you were asking, Brendan. But it's a very, very tricky one. It's
Yeah.
because there's so many answers to it.
Right. No, that does make a lot of sense, and that's a great start for that. What is a blind spot that you think most people have about themselves?
Yeah, blind spot. Now, the probably the most common blind spot that people have is again, it's that introvert extrovert thing. In that it can be binary. So you may overestimate your capacity for something, and or you may heavily underestimate it. Now, let's say that you've just done a study in a new philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you meet someone who is 70 years old that studies that philosophy their whole life. And let's say Buddhism. So a monk who's 70 versus a monk who's just graduated from monk
Yeah.
school. And very often knowing, like, you feel you're an expert because you've achieved this qualification, whereas the 70-year-old monk feels he knows nothing because he's realized that his life is not short enough to fully understand that philosophy. Is not long enough, my apologies, to fully understand that philosophy. And so probably one of the biggest blind spots that we have is overestimating on journeys where we are,
Ah,
and then underestimating where we are at the higher end. And the truth is that if you actually commit to the lifelong growth, that's one way that you can slightly negate that blind spot, by accepting that you will never fully know, but also accepting that you don't know what you don't know and being willing to learn.
yeah. I love that. With all of your personality studies, what is the most painfully accurate personality stereotype that you secretly believe is true?
So painfully accurate personality stereotype, that's true. So what I will say is that stereotypes are for a reason. Okay, stereotypes don't just come out of thin air. It's like, for example, if I stereotyped an apple as an orange, you would just think I'm a lunatic. You'd be like, yeah, it's still an apple. Okay, so to answer the question, it's a tough question. You got some tough questions, but to answer the question, the oh, can you just say it once more and I'll answer it,
I
Brendan?
I
Sorry.
wanted it just to be kind of funny, like
Oh,
so don't overthink. I don't want you to overthink it. I just
okay,
mean,
okay, okay.
stereotype personalities. Like, which one do you think is kind of true? Like, of all the
Okay.
stereotypes of a personality.
All right. No, no. In fun, yeah, yeah. Thank you for clarifying. So probably the grumpy old man
Okay.
is probably the funniest one, and that's because when I was a kid, we used to have this field near the house. It was all shared by the whole housing estate, but there was this one old guy that you built a den, he would come and destroy it. You would, yeah. So
Yep.
that's been cemented to me, and also the monk story.
Yeah.
They're at that later stage of their life, and old dog new tricks. I'm not saying they can't learn, but it
Yeah.
is. Once you meet a grumpy old man, I've very, very rarely seen them become some happy, jolly fella.
Exactly. Always the get off my lawn kind of guy,
Yeah.
right? I love that. Okay, so I have my listeners now, and they're just like questioning, I want, do I know myself very well? I want to get to know myself better. How is your book going to get that answer for them? And then where can they find it?
Well, actually, the framework I built is called PersonalityPeek.com. The Personality Peek uses a six-dimensional framework, but all I've tried to do with that is give you a mirror. So you take that quiz, it gives you some insight. It's completely free the first stage. That if you sign in, you can track yourself over time. But all that does is I've aimed to just give a mirror and a dot on a map to start from. Now, common things commonly happen, common traits this is why people at that moment in time. So when you take the test, remember that it's just a snapshot in time. It gives you some insight into now.
Yeah.
What you can do with that is I've developed a system called the third way. Because one thing that made me actually feel quite happy earlier, Brendan, is when you identified that you used stoicism for a season,
Yeah.
and you and then it didn't help you anymore. I know that because I wrote a book on stoicism, and it helps me sometimes all the time. What I've done is I've developed a system called the third way. So there is stoicism, there is naturism, and then there's a thing called the peak technique, which effectively is it ends up in keep or kill. So you decide to keep someone, okay, after you've gone through an analysis, and it's that simple. But
Nice.
all those frameworks are available, and it will channel you. It will channel you into it, with the site. But fundamentally, personalitypeak.com, it is designed to be fun, but it is designed just to hold a mirror. But remember this, guys, a quiz will never ever define you. You define yourself.
Right.
But asking questions and having insight into the self is never wrong.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think kind of also to add to what you're saying that the mirror is really uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for everybody. So if you get through that and you're just like this doesn't feel good, that's data. There I always feel like when you're super uncomfortable, that's something to look at. So if you take the quiz and you're like I really don't like how this turned out, I want you to ask the deeper questions and not just shut shut your computer and run for the hills cuz all of this is uncomfortable. Like not everybody likes looking at the mirror. That's why we spend our lives taking care of other people and pointing fingers at other people and worrying about what the Joneses are doing because that mirror sometimes really hurts. So I say there's probably a lot of wisdom on the other side of that if you ask the right questions. I think this book is going to be amazing. They can find the book on the website as well.
Yeah, so it's called the third way, and so that it's a bit of a later stage, but yes, once you've logged in, there is a library, and the books will be on there, and each archetype. So there's 64 archetypes that you can get in total, and each archetype has a dedicated book specifically to that archetype. So you'll get with the quiz good information, and then depending what stage you want to go to, you can do that, and then ultimately there is two other options where you can answer 32 questions, and I will effectively then use that with the material I've made to give you the most accurate that I believe possible insight into the self at that moment in time. And then following that, if you wanted to, there's a phone call option where we can do a one-on-one phone call to discuss your results. But if you just take the initial quiz, you will get a lot of insight, and it does. I've tried to be maximally honest with as much as I can give away without the site becoming unviable.
Right. I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love that. Well, this is the part of the show, Arky, where I get to tell you what I think makes you special. And it's not just that you study personality and that you're incredibly smart about it. I think that's awesome. It's that you genuinely want people to understand themselves from a level of honesty, not through labels, not through the fake self help gurus, not through surface level advice, but like through awareness. I think it's incredible that you're helping people recognize, those patterns, to see the blind spots, to be aware of their reactions, and just even that internal programming that has quietly shaped all of us. Once people can really see themselves, I think this is what gives them the power to change. And I am 100% behind a mission like that, because if we could just get one person, to have that awareness and do something different, we've done an incredible job. So I think what you're doing is amazing. I think it's powerful, and I think it makes you very special. To everyone listening, you guys, pay attention to your patterns, and maybe you're just like, I don't have patterns. I think we're planting the seed today for you just to be aware, to kind of question that. Do a routine checkup. Your car needs an oil change. Your brain kind of needs a little up check. So I want you just to keep an eye on your patterns, on your reactions, your emotional defaults, maybe your triggers, and even your habits, because eventually the things that you refuse to examine, that's the shit that starts controlling your life. And self-awareness is uncomfortable. Like I said, when you go to Arky's website, there's going to be a little discomfort, but it's because once you see the pattern, you can't pretend you don't anymore. God did not create you to live your whole life unconsciously reacting to wounds, to fear, to let your past defining you and control you. The big scary boogeyman wins every time in that life. He created you to grow, to just be radically honest. And please, you guys, remember that your mess is your message. Even the overthinking, even the spirals, even the patterns that completely embarrass you, those things can become the catalyst to real growth. That's the stuff that launches you. If this episode speaks to you, do me a favor and share it out so that Arky can reach that person that really needs to get on the website, get their test done, and have this book, okay? You know the person that we can't reach. And so it's a very selfless act to just share this out. And you guys know, if you're ready for the hot seat, I double dog dare you to come tell me why you're special. Arky, thank you so much. This was so awesome. I really, really appreciate you jumping on with us today.
That was wonderful. I very much appreciate your time as well. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.